On May 14th, 2018, the United States Supreme Court overturned PASPA, a law that prohibited sports gambling across the nation, in a 6-3 decision based on the 10th Amendment, officially making the decision to legalize sports gambling up to the states and opened the country up to massive growth in the industry. Today, we dive into the history of sports gambling and this major, monumental decision today on Daily Sports History. Welcome to Daily Sports History. I'm Ethan Reese, your guide to a rapid deep dive into sports history every day. Now, gambling goes as far back as to when games and sports began. But in America, the first form of gambling was actually the lottery, which helped the original colonies fund the American Revolutionary War through taxes on the lottery. And this slowly started other games and sports to be involved in gambling as well, as horse racing became more popular, with the very first racetrack in North America being built in Long Island, New York in 1665. And people began gambling at roadhouses and taverns with card games and rudimentary slot machines. But the problem was, more and more, there was fraud going on with these lotteries and gambling institutions. And so the government stepped in, saying if you offered gambling services, including lotteries and horse racing, it had to be without fraud. And you could be brought up on charges if you were found to be defrauding the general public. And nothing brought this to light more than when the 1919 Chicago Black Sox scandals happened, when 8 members of the heavily favored Chicago White Sox were accused of intentionally throwing the World Series versus the Cincinnati Reds. And these 8 players were banned for life from Major League Baseball, a stance that helped lead the way for other professional sports to take a hard, fast rule against gambling in sports. Even though only 5 of the 8 players were brought up on charges of fraud, and all charges were eventually dropped, the players still remained banned from baseball forever. Now, due to this, gambling was hit or miss across the country where it was legal and what actually was legal. And anti-gambling laws continued to go across the country, limiting sports gambling especially due to the fraud that could come. But other gambling as well was being saw as immoral, and laws were getting passed from various states. But in the 1930s, in the Great Depression, Nevada was struggling economically, and so they decided to legalize gambling, becoming one of the first states to do so and help boost their economy. And in 1949, to increase tourism to the state, they actually legalized sports betting, becoming the first state to do so, and helped lead a boom to their economy, especially in Las Vegas. But in 1951, the federal government instituted a tax on all sports betting of 10%, which made sports betting a losing proposition for most institutions and limited the amount of people that actually were able to do legalized sports gambling, and it led it more to underground bookies. But in 1954, Congress reduced the tax to 2%, which gave Nevada and Las Vegas a chance to prosper, and sports gambling grew and grew. But in the 1960s, the U.S. government instituted a few more laws to help prohibit gambling across the nation and limit fraud that had been going on, as there had been multiple scandals, including the NHL in 1948 having Billy Taylor and Don Gallagher be banned for life for fixing games. And in 1951, the City College of New York, who had just won the national championship in basketball, had been point shaving in their games, and in a scandal that included multiple teams and changed the perspective on gambling in sports. In 1961, the U.S. government passed the Federal Wire Act, which prohibited wager transfers over interstate lines and foreign commerce, so you could not make wagers over the phone, as many in other states besides Nevada would call to Nevada to try to place a bet. And if you were caught doing this, you could have a fine of up to $10,000 or 2 years in prison. They also passed a few more laws including the Travel Act, which prohibited the use of mail and other goods for unlawful activities, and then the Interstate Transportation of Paraphernalia Act, which included physical tools and materials associated with gambling. And in 1964, they passed the Sports Bribery Act, which made it illegal to pay players in sports to point shave or throw games. Despite these acts, illegal gambling didn't stop in the 1970s and 80s, and the U.S. Justice Department actually decided to deprioritize the enforcement of anti-gambling laws. As it was so widespread, they did not have the budget to keep up with the amount of illegal gambling going on across the country. But in 1976, New Jersey made a huge decision to allow casinos and gambling in their state, becoming the second state to do so, with a major focus on Atlantic City, who was trying to be the Las Vegas of the East. Despite all these new laws, sports gambling continued to have its scandals. There was point shavings at Boston College in 1978 and 79, and Pete Rose famously was banned from baseball for betting on MLB games that he managed. So in 1992, Congress came down hard on sports gambling and passed the PASPA, known as the Professional and Amateur Sports Protection Act, which banned states or government entities from legalizing sports wagering. And it said that it was unlawful for governments to sponsor, operate, advertise, promote, license any sports wagering, and including a person as well. This included lottery, sweepstakes, and betting on all sporting events. But it did grandfather in locations that had already had this. So Nevada and Las Vegas became more of a monopoly for sports gambling than anything else and helped boost their economy. But other states did have forms of sports wagering on their books, including Delaware, Oregon, Montana, and New Jersey. And they were allowed to keep the form of sports wagering that they had. Then in 2006, the internet was starting to become a big boom, and sports betting on the internet became a major issue and the target to help regulate. And a law as the Unlawful Internet Gambling Enforcement Act came down to include that you could not gamble on sports over the internet. But this again didn't stop there from being issues when in 2007 it was found out that Tim Donaghy, a longtime NBA referee, had been part of a mob-connected scheme to bet on games which he officiated and possibly changed the outcome of the games. In 2009, many states started to try to overturn the PASPA law, filing multiple lawsuits, with none really making its way to the Supreme Court. Until 2016, when New Jersey governor filed another petition for a right of habeas corpus, which meant it would be reviewed by the Supreme Court. And despite the Solicitor General trying to get the case thrown out, the Supreme Court agreed to hear the arguments. And on December 18th, they heard oral arguments based around the fact that it was violating the 10th Amendment, which is an amendment that says the federal government only has the power to delegate in the Constitution, and if it's not listed, then it belongs to the states or the people. And after hearing the arguments, the Supreme Court overturned PASPA, and it opened the floodgates for states to start to include gambling. And this included online gambling, which was now going to become a major factor, which included online sports gambling sites such as DraftKings and FanDuel. Now, ever since this overruling, there have been over $200 billion bet on sports. And at the time of this recording, all but 11 states have passed laws to legalize sports gambling in some sort of way in their state, with states such as California, Texas, and Georgia all actively trying to pass laws to legalize it in their states as well. Since the law has been overturned, sportsbooks have made over $17 billion in the industry, but at the same time, states and local government have made over $3 billion, and federal government has made over $500 million, which has helped increase budgets for all levels of government, which in some ways can be a very good thing. Whether you agree or disagree with sports gambling, I think what's important to realize is that it's good that we have the decision now in most places to decide if we want to gamble or not. Ultimately, Whether you agree with sports gambling or not, it is great that we had the decision to choose if we want to gamble or not. And with that decision, the challenges of fighting against fraud will always be there, as money can make us do crazy things. But it gives us the opportunity to make our own path. It can make games more enjoyable. It can make us a little money. It can lose a lot of money as well, as generally people lose more money than they make. But as those commercials always say, bet responsibly, meaning don't bet too much. It's just a game. Enjoy betting for entertainment. Don't bet the house or the farm because it's just not worth it. But I'm willing to bet that you loved today's episode and you're loving daily sports history. So if you do, please leave us a review or a rating wherever you're listening. And if you take a screenshot and email it to us at dailysportshistory@gmail.com, we will send you something special as a surprise. And come back tomorrow for more daily sports history.